Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Hello to everybody, wherever you are. My name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach and author of the wonderful little book, A Life to Die For. I'm also one of the co authors of the best selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self Care. So, welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. This is episode 232, and we're going to have one of my favorite topics today. It's called Surrendering the Ego Mind. Now, what I have found, and I think what a lot of people find, is that one of the most profound and transformative experiences you can have in life is to transcend the ego mind. Now, I'm not saying I've transcended my ego mind, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I have had moments. But I'm going to ask you now to imagine just sailing past the confines of your ego mind into a deeper, more profound sense of self and connection with the world around you. This process, ego mind surrender, holds the potential for the unfoldment of actual miracles in your life. Now, the ego mind is usually experienced as a constant chatter in your head or as an inner critic that judges, compares, and perpetuates the illusion of separateness. It's a source of fear and insecurity for most people. And in the interest of its own survival, it promotes the idea that you need to constantly protect and defend your self image. While the ego mind might be essential for navigating the vicissitudes of life in general and in the physical world, it can also be a kind of prison, limiting your true potential and preventing you from experiencing the fullness of life's wonders. When you allow the ego mind to run your life, you face a myriad of challenges. One of the most significant is the constant sense of inner turmoil. The ego is always striving for more, seeking external validation, and comparing itself to others. This ongoing, relentless pursuit of status, success, and recognition can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction with life. You may find yourself chasing after goals and achievements, only to discover that they merely bring temporary happiness at the very best. Ego mind surrender offers a way out of these challenges, providing inner peace, interconnectedness, and a deeper understanding of your true self. For this episode of Life Mastery TV, I have called upon my good friend, Laina Orlando, a very well respected teacher, coach, and expert on A Course in Miracles. As someone who knows the depths of her own ego and has learned to witness and observe its operations firsthand, Laina has elevated her consciousness to a place that many of us can only dream of. Well, actually, we could do more than that. But anyway, she brings a lot of wisdom and humility in her teachings, and I am really delighted to welcome her back to the program today. Welcome, Laina. Thank you for coming back. It's been too long, and I'm just so glad you're here again.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It's just always an honor and a pleasure. And let me just start with, but I haven't fully transcended my ego, but I know it well, and I do not let it take over.
Yeah, I know. And that's just the point that we're really talking about, isn't it? First of all, before I go there, I just want to say welcome to the people who are here live. Thank you for being here. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to post them in the chat and we'll do our best to respond to those as we proceed. But Lina, you just said a very, very important thing. I have not yet transcended my ego. Well, neither have I. And frankly, I really don't know very many people who have. I'm sure there are some, and I would dearly love to meet someone like that. But so far, that hasn't happened in my life. So I think the lesson we can learn from that is that surrendering the ego, transcending the ego, is first and foremost a process. And as you said, you have dived into your ego, you have learned more about it, so you understand its workings and its operations, and I think that's probably the most important step that any of us can take. So why don't you begin by sharing with us a little bit about what you've learned about your own ego mind and how it operates in your life.
Mm. Well, I was let me just share that I've been on this journey for 20 years. So in 2002, I started in August, so just a little bit over 20 years. And this journey began by my feeling like there had to be another way. I was I had achieved so much success in my life. I was at the top of the ladder in so many things. I was 41 at the time, so do the math, you know how old I am now. And it was I know I don't look 61, do I? I'll tell you what, working beyond moving beyond your ego youths us because like Jesus said, we have to become like little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. So it really is a process of peeling back and moving back towards the truth of who we are. And as I began to question, I mean, is this all there is to life? I kept chasing, I kept acquiring, I kept achieving, and I was still empty inside. It was like, how
Yeah.
in the world can this be? But then thankfully, at 41, I had the moment that began to change everything for me, and it happened to be the death of my mom. And when she died, I entered into this stage of it was beyond grief. It was terror. I was
Mm,
so afraid to die because I grew up Catholic and the Catholics had filled my mind with all of these ideas of hell and I'm a sinner and I'll never measure up and poor
mm,
Jesus he died because of how what a bad person I was. And even as a little girl it's like I'm just a little girl, why did they kill him before me? Um so little by little, I began to question these fears and where they were coming from. And, you know, I used to be afraid to say this because my ego didn't was concerned about what people thought of me. Now I don't care. But I began to hear a voice. I began to be guided. And that voice came in the familiar feeling. The essence that I felt was the essence of Jesus. And I was being guided to look at my beliefs, my thoughts about death and hell. And I began to feel this incredible compassionate guidance that was basically saying, do you really think I would I that God, do you really think God, a parent like you or a mother, because I was a mother, had 3 children at that time, would bring into life these beautiful beings and then roast them for eternity? What kind of a parent would do that? You've got
mm,
to begin to think logically here. So, I was guided to read specific things, to watch specific movies, to listen to specific people that began to help me see the absolute absurdity of a loving creator roasting its children for life. You mean you have these children, you love them, you take care of them, and then you say, you know, you don't measure up. You just don't measure up. And it began to dawn on me, oh my gosh, yes, I've been taught about God the Father, but I was taught about God the Father, a human father who has faults. My father had lots of faults. Alcoholic, drunk, unavailable, left our family when we were all young children. Okay, yeah. So we have made God in the image of that father. That some days he's happy, some days he's not. And I had to begin to sort out what is human made and what is truth, capital T truth, and what is really of God. I had to basically work my way back. I had to leave God of the church to come back to God of my own understanding. And through that process, I was being gently guided by this voice, helping me sort everything into 2 columns. All of my teachings, well, this one, I teach there's the voice for God when we are aligned with our truth and we operate from the energies of truth, high frequency. When we listen to the voice of the ego and we basically suppress the frequency or lessen the frequencies, drown them out, um, that sorting process began to help me see that I had 2 voices in my head. One always activated fear, always came from a place of insecurities and what people had taught me. One I experienced as peace, as clarity, as certainty, always let me feeling in a state of oneness with all that is. I felt connected. I felt, you know, I just felt powerful. And little by little, what began to happen is that all of these lies and things that I had learned that activated fear, confusion, shame, guilt, judgments, jealousy, all began to neatly fall under one category, and it's called ego. Ego is not a
Wow.
thing. We don't have an ego. You can't go surgically remove it. If we could, we'd all be done with it. But
Right.
ego is a collection of beliefs, thoughts that are not true. They are
Right.
thoughts that oppose the truth. So if I want to, if I know that gravity is going to pull me down and I go, no, it's not, I'm going to jump off, and no, it's not. That's ego talking. Because if you're listening to the truth, and you know what gravity does, well, if you're going to jump off, you're going to at least use what do you call those things? A parachute. So if you're operating with God, you're going to take risks and chances with certainty and preparedness. If you're listening to the ego, you're going to make a lot of foolish mistakes. And to me, following that path of sorting out those two voices was crucial, because that is the only way to surrender the ego. You need to understand the thoughts and beliefs.
Of
It
course.
took
Yeah.
me a
Mhm,
couple
mhm.
of years to surrender the idea that there is a hell outside of me. I had to go through many moments of fear, many moments of just I was afraid. Oh my gosh, I got to listen to what my grandmother taught me. If I don't follow, she's going to be so upset with me, even though she was on in another realm, because I didn't listen to her and I loved her. So I had to work through my fears of disappointing loved ones and not being in allegiance with people that I loved and trusted. And all of those were fear based. All of that is ego.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, I know. Well, first of all, beautifully said. And as always, I know this. I notice as I'm listening to you the parallels in my own life that I've gone through a lot of similar experiences for sure. Um, the first thing I wanted to say was when you talked about being a little girl and saying, "I'm just a little girl. Why would God want to do this to me?" I, it occurred to me, I never thought about it in that way before because I don't really remember having that kind of experience as a child. But I can certainly resonate with that now, and I can understand how children can take something that's even offered as a very innocuous statement. For example, a really simple one: "Oh, allergies run in our family." You know, if a kid, you're not even talking to the kid. You might be as an adult talking to another adult, and a little child's just sitting there playing and hears this. And now the child says, "Oh, daddy said that allergies run in our family. So it must be true. And because it must be true, I must believe it." And therefore, I then set myself up to become a victim of allergies. Now, I'm choosing a very, very lighthearted kind of example, but this is how children's minds operate. They don't really have any way to discern truth from falsehood when they're young. So they assume that what they hear from the people they trust must be true.
Exactly.
And how many of us were told by our parents that we have to trust the priest or the minister, that we have to trust our religion, that we have to trust the police, the doctors, and all the other people in our life, and they are the voices of authority. And in the process of telling us that, they're also telling us whatever voice of authority you think you have inside yourself, hey, don't listen to that. That's the subtext. And so, I in my own journey, I came to many of the same conclusions you did. I said, this just can't be right. I said, there's no way that the God that they're describing would do these things to all these people just because a small fraction of them don't happen to share the same beliefs as everybody else.
Yeah.
That's complete bullshit. I don't buy it. And I slowly started pulling myself away from first the Anglican Church, then the Catholic Church, and then I started thinking, well, then what's left for me, because I could not think of God in those terms anymore. So I basically threw the term God away, and as I started doing my own work and started becoming more aware of the voice of love within me, I started connecting to a similar guide, if you like. I didn't recognize it as Jesus, but I had my own voice. And in the end, I came up with a whole new name for God because I didn't like the one that we had created before. So I call my version of all that is, I call that omnitude. And that just resonates for me because it allows for the possibility that omnitude is all that is, which of course all that is ultimate truth too. And so we can only see ultimate truth when we can bring our consciousness elevated up high enough that we're no longer focused on the little falsehoods that exist in our life. Anyway, I different terminologies, but I think we're on exactly the same path. I think we're in the same frequency range. I think we're in the same elevation of consciousness. And I am really excited because when I hear you speak, I can feel myself getting kind of giddy and excited.
Well, it is exciting. It is exciting to let go of limitation. It's very exciting. I don't know if I ever shared with you, but about, I'm going to say 5 years into my journey, I was, I too was having a hard time with talking about God. At that time, I called it spirit, I called it source, I called it creator. I was attending a spiritual community, a unity church in the area that I was in, and they called it spirit. They called it, source. I was like, yes, I love that. And it was all about love and kumbaya, and that was wonderful. And then I began to little by little be guided to become a student of A Course in Miracles. And Course in Miracles talks about God. And I was like, I'm not ready to
Yeah,
embrace
right. Yep, yep.
God of this
Mhm.
book. And the voice was telling me, okay, well, we're gonna give it another name. We're gonna give it an acronym. And for about a decade, I referred to it as GSEL, and the acronym was GSEL. And what it stands for is God is the source of the energy of love. And I was told, if you just know it as GSEL, know it as the source of the energy of love, that's all that God is. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So it took me many years to
Right.
get so comfortable because these lies that we have been conditioned to believe, they have a frequency, they have a density, they weigh us down like the sandbags in a hot air balloon. And it's not that we cut the sandbags off and then we take off, because if that was the case, it'd be like 5 or 6 sandbags. But you got to release a grain of sand at a time from each sandbag, because you got to look at every single belief over and over and over and over again. For example, when you were talking about this whole idea, somebody listening to that about the illnesses, you can catch them or whatever you said. I made a decision. This was around probably 10 years old. I think I was 51 years old, that I was not going to buy into the whole menopause thing. All my friends were going through menopause and talking about all the changes and the heat. And I decided I'm not buying into that. And it was so amazing because at that point I had already started. I'm not going for regular checkup. I'm not going to go get mammoth. I'm not going to go have my boobs squeezed anymore. I'm not going to go through that process. And my doctor was insisting that I had to go for a colonoscopy. I'm like, I'm not going to go through that process. I never heard anything fun about that. I've never had a friend say, "Oh, I'm going to go get my colonoscopy." And I was like, I don't want to find out. So I decided, no, I'm not buying into this. I canceled my insurance. I still, till this day, I will not do insurance. I don't go to regular doctor checkups. I don't do any of those things. Other than having my teeth cleaned, because I do like the way they feel. But no fear. I am not putting fluoride on I'm not doing anything that I'm told I need to do to experience the freedom, the well-being, the health that I know God has already given me. And
Right.
for that to move forward as my lived experience, I can't block it with beliefs that contradict it. That's what the ego does. Ego is the acceptance of a contradiction as if that is your truth. Well, here's the thing. And this is what is so wonderful about having this conversation with you. And I hope that this gets, shared far and wide, is that as long as we believe a contradiction, our mind doesn't know the difference between is it truth or not truth. Our mind is like a projector that projects out into the screen of the life that we experience that contradiction as if it's our reality. And it doesn't judge. The mind does not judge. So we're using the very mind that projects our reality to project a reality that I get sick because mom sick was sick, I get sick because, the church said hell exists. Well, that's where I'm going to go. So transcending the ego, or surrendering, whatever terminology we want to use, is little by little by little choosing to question what we believe. And if it activates fear, saying, could there be a way that I can experience this without fear? And to choose to see things without fear is to ground ourselves. Number one, it's in a level of trust, unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. But trusting an unseen, I can't like touch it and say, okay, well, this is where God is, because it was cultivating a relationship with that power existing within me. And
Exactly.
little by little, I was coming back. Where's the kingdom of heaven? It's within. Little by little, I was coming back to trusting that if I don't want illness, I don't have to have it. If I
Right.
don't want, and if I end up with an illness, it's because it is part of my experience, and I'm okay with bringing all my love and awareness and consciousness to it, if that's what was going to happen. But
Right.
from where I sit today, I don't need to have that in my experience, because I've seen people with it and it's not fun. And they're not enjoying themselves, except for very few. I've met uh 3 to date, conscious beings who went through illnesses, cancer, one still going through it, with a level of awareness that was so beautiful, so absolutely just magical to watch how they acknowledged that they had fears would come up. They would acknowledge that they were going to miss their family. They acknowledged that, you know what, it's fun being a human. And it was fun having the things that they had here, and they were going to miss that. And to grieve that period while they were still alive, knowing that they were moving towards the completion of their lifetime, is really how we all should live our lives. But
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they used cancer in both, well, all 3 cases it's been cancer, to experience life without the ego running the show, and instead allow our humanness to be aligned with our divinity, our trust of our eternalness, to realize this is just a temporary show. Just enjoy it while you're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And from that place, then the ego doesn't make such a big, hairy deal out of life, which we really have to get comfortable. It's not such a big deal. You can have multiple of these things. We have,
Right.
we're eternal beings. And if we look at a lifetime of 100 years, it's a blip in eternity. If we use a measurements that are totally incorrect, but we'll go with them because, it's all we've got, of that this universe is 1 billion years old. If you divide 100 into 1 billion, that's a lot of lives. So why make such a big hairy deal out of this one, when if we live this one in such a way that is in alignment with love, joy, and peace, the next one we pick up where we left off. But because
Right.
we live this life in such limitation and fear and suffering, we pick up where we left off. That's why children are born with cancer or with whatever. They're picking up where that soul left off before. And it's
Sure.
not a punishment. And this was another thing that is so liberating, that we have to understand about the ego. We are not being punished when bad things happen to us. We are simply being reflected back what we believe we deserve. And if you
Right.
believe you're going to catch, cancer runs in the family and you get cancer, it's because you believe you deserve that. God is the creative source, lets us experience what we believe we are to get. And that's why people can't move out of their patterns of life because internally they believe that that's what they deserve.
Right.
It's amazing going down this path of understanding the ego. Oh my gosh, we can go in a million different directions.
Right. Yeah. And we often do.
Yeah.
You were taught this whole thing about having diseases or having, ill health or any of that stuff. I agree that it almost always stems from some kind of a belief system um, that is in lower energy. I think that's absolutely true. I've been reading. I've shared with you before. I've been reading a lot of David R. Hawkins' work. He is the man who studied consciousness in great depth, and he wrote many amazing books about the idea of consciousness. And he talks about the ego as well, and he talks about divinity. He talks about God. He's really a very spiritual man, I think. But I've read 7 of his books already, and I'm on book number 8 right now, which is called Healing and Recovery. And what's interesting to me now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're talking about healing,
Mhm.
and that's exactly what it is. And he said something in his book that just kind of blew my mind. I mean, I think I knew this already, but it was one of those things. You said, "Oh, right, I heard that before, and now it's time for me to pay attention to it." But he talked about having many different diseases in his physical life and going through some of the challenges that you've already described, that some of your friends have gone through. And he just said, what is the source of healing? What is the path to healing? He kind of asked himself that question. And he realized that a big part of it is first acknowledging that you've got what you've got, acknowledging and experiencing it.
Yeah.
He says you got to experience it. Then, once you do that, now you can start to look at what is the belief system that I have that may have invited this in, and what can I do about that belief system. And he uses a word that I would never have used in my own teaching, but he says, I cancel that belief. I choose to remember that I am an infinite being and I am not subject to that belief. And he just started developing this pattern of changing his thoughts. As soon as he recognized a belief that wasn't really serving him, or that might be contributing to some aspect of his life that he didn't really want in his life, then he would just start that process. He also says that, and you said this yourself, very often what comes into his life, it's not just necessarily a belief system that you might have picked up in this lifetime. It might be something to do with what he calls karmic propensities.
Mhm.
Um, Now, some people believe in that stuff, some people don't. That's okay. It doesn't really matter whether you believe it or not. What matters is we all go through experiences. And on some level, we decided to have these experiences perhaps before we came into this life. I think of it for myself. I think of what I really wanted to experience. My ultimate goal in my life was to really fully, truly experience the complete depth and truth of who I really am. But I don't think I planned out all of the pathway to get to that place, but a part of my journey had to do with denying who I am in the early stages of my life. In other words, being very attached to my ego and trying to live up to what I believed other people wanted. It wasn't until, I reached a certain level of creating pain in my own life and in the lives of other people that I finally woke up and said, this is not working. I got to do something different. And that's when my whole life shifted. And like you, I did not transcend the ego, but I suddenly realized my ego was running the show and doing a very piss poor job at it. So it's time for me to start listening to a different source of information. That's kind of how it went. And I think, like I said, you and I are very much in alignment here. And I just love that we have two different ways of saying it, because people need to hear it from different perspectives, perhaps, in order to be able to understand their own experience.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is, as you were talking about David Hawkins, I definitely have read several of his books. As a matter of fact, a lot of my teachings, I use the power of awareness chart. Where is it? Right here.
Yeah, that
And
looks like a consciousness chart right there.
it is. And I have blended not only David Hawkins, but Esther Hicks shares the scale of emotions. And in all of my I was given teachings to share called the power of awareness. It's the workshops and the retreats that I did for, gosh, oh my God, 12, 13 years, um, until a couple of years ago. And now with my move, I put all that on hold, but I'll start doing them again. And, and I was given a very simple process that I still to this day is how I coach my clients. And it's called shift and lift. You shift from ego and you lift into the frequencies of God. You shift from fear, you lift into love. And it's very simple questions that have people become aware that if they continue to let fears be their reality, they're going to experience more discomfort. They're
Right.
shifting and drifting in those lower
Mhm.
frequencies. Life is a drag because you're pulling those weights. It's heavy. It's like you're walking through your life almost as if you're going through quicksand. It's hard to really change things. But when you get really clear that you can say whatever word you want to use, cancel, no, I'm done with that. I mean, we can say, I'm done with fear. I'm done with thinking I'm not
Right.
capable. I'm done with illness. We can do that. But
Yes.
we have fears about, well, what if I say that and it's not true? Well, what if I cancel my insurance and there is, there is something happens to me? Why would I invite something to happen in the future when in this now moment I don't want that? In this now moment, it's not that I don't want it because I welcome anything that shows up in my life. I don't resist anything anymore. But because I'm very clear that my source is a source of love, it's a source of eternal life, it's a source of well being, it's a source of joy, of peace. I'm not looking for things to come to me that are opposite to that. I'm looking
Right.
to live from that. So whether we cancel it or whatever we choose to do, we can't do that step until we become observers. And that is one of the most difficult things for people to do because an observer needs to shut up. And I had a hard time shutting up. I had chats, I had an opinion about everything, whether I spoke it or not. I could not be, my whole life, I couldn't be an observer because I was a commentator. I was commenting on everything. And when I had such an incredible awareness of this, I'm from the Dominican Republic, the country of baseball. I'm a baseball fanatic. I love baseball. Until many many years ago, I used to go watch the Braves because I lived in Atlanta, so home of the Braves. I used to go watch them live all the time at the stadium, and it was so much fun. And one day, I'm sitting there watching the game. Actually, this wasn't live. I was watching it on TV. I couldn't be there live, and maybe because it was on TV, it was even more profound. I'm watching the game and I'm listening to these commentators give me the stats of the players and tell me these things about these things. And whoever was on second base and blah, blah, blah. And they're talking about, and I realized they're telling me what I should be observing and what I should be knowing instead of letting me enjoy the game. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's what my ego is constantly telling me what I should be thinking, the stats that I need to be, have top of mind. So every player would come up and they had a certain percentage, batting average or whatever. I didn't enjoy the game that day. I realized I can't enjoy this game. I've got somebody telling me what I should be paying attention to. And I used to play baseball or softball, and I used to be a pitcher, and I used to love shortstop and outfield often because it's just positions that I liked. So I liked watching the shortstop. I just think it's an exciting position, or the pitcher. What pitch are they throwing? Blah 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 blah. And the commentator had me focused on the person at first base or third base or wherever it was, and I realized it took my attention away from what I was really enjoying about the game. And that's when it just dawned on me. The commentators that we're so conditioned to listen to in the outer world, whether it's somebody who's a commentator on a sports game or in the news about whatever's happening in the Middle East, and they're telling you their opinions, I realized I got to stop listening to people's opinions. I've got to focus on what internally my heart is guiding me to look at, to
Right.
experience. And once I made that connection, I got to retire this commentator in my head. I mean, it's time to put them out to pasture.
Right.
Go sit on the
Fire the
bench.
commentator. Right, right, right. Well, that's a
It,
beautiful, you know, metaphor, I think, and something that everybody can learn from. You know, you talk about being an observer, and I think you're right. Being a simple observer is not a trivial task for anybody to do. Um, here's just a simple test that anybody can try. Next time you're outside, just stop and look at the clouds. And when you're looking at the clouds, try not to see the bunny rabbits or the flowers or the faces. Just see the clouds. And I'm telling you, that is a very, very difficult thing to do. I can maybe do it for like 5 seconds, and then all of a sudden my mind starts seeing patterns in the shapes. And I have to say, no, no, just look at the clouds. Just look at the clouds. And so if you can practice that, what you can do is you can start to develop your ability to observe without commentary, without interpretation, without judgment. All right. And that is a
it's
trying
difficult.
to just observe my own life. You think it's hard to do it with clouds, try and do it with your life, you know? And so the secret, I think, here is to learn to say, okay, this is what is right now. That's it. This is what is. Thank you for what is. I am grateful for what is. And just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And you see that what this does, I think, is it helps to bring up that sense of, well, love that you've been talking about, raising your awareness and also raising your consciousness level so that you're not in fear anymore about what is. You are simply observing it as it is. Okay? And that
Yeah.
includes, I mean, all of the horrible things we have going on in the world. Can you just look at them and say, this is what is right now? And try to elevate that level of gratefulness so that you can bring love to that situation rather than more fear.
Yeah. Let me say something because that's such an important point that you made. Not just observing the clouds, but and not trying to be sidetracked with coming up with shapes. But if it was just that, it'd be not so bad. But we start thinking about we're looking at the clouds and all of a sudden, oh, there's a chemtrail. Oh, look, there's it's getting dark. Oh, if it's getting dark, it's going to rain. I've got to
Right.
worry. I got to go cover whatever. I don't have a rain jacket. And if I don't have a rain jacket, oh, my rain jacket is old. It's got a hole in it. I got to go buy a new rain jacket. Where's there a sale for a rain jacket? And oh, if I don't make it to the store in time, I'm not going to have a rain jacket. And look at the cloud. It's nonstop commentator in the head.
That's right.
When I began to become an observer, I'm telling you, the hardest part was telling myself to shut up
Right.
because I had an opinion, an idea about everything. And of course, I was always right. It had to be. All of us, this is the thing. This is the egoitis, is that it
That's
has
right.
to be right, even about what it thinks it's wrong. It's got to be right about that. And, victims, we have to be right about our victimization. We just have to be right about everything. So to make yourself stop judging or stop commentating or stop thinking about it, analyzing is so crucial because when we create that space between us and our thoughts and we become an observer, what I began to realize is my ego several things. One, it was always speaking from my most um, either hurt self, which was when my dad left our family, and it was a sense of abandonment that I experienced. It was operating from that place, trying to avoid ever being abandoned by anybody else. So I operated from that very immature little 10-year-old. Or it was always striving to achieve my highest potential that I had ever achieved, and always trying to one up that one. So it was a very immature aspect of me that was
Right.
always doing the commentating.
Yeah, I've
And
had the same experience.
oh my gosh, it was just when I began to be, because it takes a lot of maturity. I had to become mature enough. When I became an observer, I had to be willing to sit with whatever came up, welcoming not only the thought, but allowing the emotions that were connected. Because see, people don't understand that our thoughts, our beliefs are all connected to emotions, energy that has not been put into motion. Those little uh, pebbles of sand, the grains of sand in the sandbag that weighs us down, are emotional experiences that we haven't felt. And when I became an observer of the thoughts and I began to trace them to the emotional component of them, and I sat and I realized, why do I cling to people? Why am I having a judgment about this person that if they leave, or at the time, part of what happened in my journey was I went through a divorce. And I when I sat with these thoughts, I didn't want a divorce because I was right and he was wrong. At that point I had too much awareness about who I am and what was going on, and who all of us are. That all of us are doing the best that we can with what we've got. I knew I needed to learn from this so that I wouldn't repeat patterns. And my next marriage, it was a total different pattern. So I didn't repeat, but I got to see two sides of myself. So they were both, these two wonderful husbands helped me see how my first husband, I had married my father. And I brought to my life the patterns of a man being like my father. My second husband, it was patterns of my mother. And I got to heal these two ideas that I had about how men are, how women are, because I tracked it that to me because I was still vibrating in those frequencies. So it's beautiful
Sure.
opportunities for growth. But when I began to be an observer while I was married to Philip, my baby daddy, I was noticing that the judgments that I had could be traced to beliefs that I had picked up when I was a little girl about my dad. And those thoughts then were attached to fears of abandonment. And the emotions of that little girl who was abandoned so many years earlier had to be worked through. So, as an observer, I literally sat feeling feelings and emotions that I had worked really hard to never feel again. I
Right.
mean, I drank a lot of margaritas, I did a lot of shopping, I did all kinds of things to avoid ever feeling those feelings.
Sure.
And as an observer, you gain this level of maturity where you can sit and let that 6-year-old me, that 10-year-old me, that 20-year-old me feel what she needed to feel,
Hmm.
not judge it, not label it, not blame it. When I was able to sit and observe, I began to realize another thing about the ego. The ego is, I needed to turn it into my amigo, because if I could listen to what it was saying, it was telling me the exact trap that it had set up to imprison me. And I realized, if I continue to listen to the most immature part of myself and let that one run my life, I'm stuck, in a time warp. I'm
Hmm.
reacting like a
Right.
wounded 10-year-old. And here I'm thinking I'm a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old mature woman making decisions from a wounded 10-year-old place, because everything that I did was to protect me from feeling hurt.
Right.
Why would I be hurt if somebody, uh, if somebody doesn't make an appointment, if my friend is late for a lunch date or cancels? I used to react to that. Oh, I've been abandoned again. I'm never going to go out with that friend again. I'm never going to make an appointment with so. I reacted so much to life from that immature place. And the
Sure.
more that I became an observer and I saw my thoughts and emotions and all are connected. They're all interconnected. They create a web that I operated inside of that was like an armor of self-protection. That sounds like a good idea. Oh, I'm protecting myself until you realize that the only one who's inside that protection is you, meaning you're in a prison. I
Hmm.
was in solitary confinement all the
Right.
time, me against the world. It doesn't seem that way until you begin to observe, but it crucial. There is a period of time, and I'm just going to share this a little bit, but there's a second part to this that I hope that we get to. We have to make ego our amigo. We have to let it tell us what it thinks, how it views the world. We've got to become willing to sit and listen to the insanity that we have been believing. But we
Hmm.
have to befriend the ego. We can't attack it. We have to just, in a way, we're luring in this aspect of ourselves that we're setting up the stage. Okay, you can say anything you want to say. It's okay. I am ready to hear whatever you have to say. What this reminded me of is I used to love spy movies, and specifically, I used to love the old James Bond movies. And probably because all the women were so beautiful and the songs were so amazing, I didn't really care about the spy part and the blowing up things. I used to just love the cute outfits that the girls would wear. But anyhow, when I began to really observe what the ego was doing and I realized its trickeries, I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, this is just like James Bond. I have to befriend the enemy." So to me,
Exactly.
ego my amigo was so that I could get all the stuff that I needed to get from it to figure out to stay a step ahead of it. Because when I began to realize that every every thought that the ego has is to attempt to create a specific circumstance. And to stop that pattern, to cancel that thought pattern, was to cancel the repetition of circumstances, the repetition of betrayals, the repetition of judgments, of lies, of whatever. Because if you don't stop the thinking, you're going to create the same thing, insanity. And you can't do something different, or you can't keep doing the same thing, expect a different result. So when I began to channel my inner James Bond, I began to observe that this amigo that I had was really an enemy. And
Of
Course in
course.
Miracles helped
Well,
me
before you go on, can I interrupt you here briefly? Because
fully.
you covered a lot of ground there, and I would like to just kind of wind it up a little. Um, so first of all, I think that you talked about uh, feeling your feelings, especially the ones that you hadn't allowed yourself to feel early on. I think that's very, very important. I think that's something that we all need to do. And sometimes, because we've spent so much time and energy pushing those aside for whatever reason, actually feeling them again is a difficult thing. And not only that, but we may be afraid of what we might unleash if we open up
Mhm,
that box and let stuff out. So, what you're really talking about here, uh, in my terminology, is shadow work. You're allowing stuff to come out from the shadows, reveal themselves, and then hopefully you can understand what the shadow was really trying to do, and to bring it back into yourself and to reintegrate it. And I
yeah,
know that for myself, my ego mind really is just the outward manifestation of my shadow. That's what it is for me. And so
mhm,
when I befriend my ego, as you suggest, and this is something that I also teach my clients, befriending the ego doesn't mean that you necessarily agree with everything it does. It doesn't mean that you condone anything it does. It just simply means that you are present as a loving, unconditionally loving parent to this wounded child that just wants some love and attention. That's how you can approach your ego. And then you don't have to say, I agree with you or anything like that. But what you can do is you can start to listen to what the ego has to say. And you say, please help me understand more about what that's about. And then what you're doing is you're allowing your own inner child to share its fears with you. So
Mhm.
that over a course of time, and you may have to do this many, many times. I mean, I certainly had to do it many times. What happens is you reach a certain point, and now when the ego starts to act up, you can just simply pause and you can say, "Oh, thank you for that. Is it time for us to have a conversation? Or can I just be the adult here and do what needs to happen? I appreciate your giving me this warning. I appreciate your letting me know that there might be some danger out there. And I really love you for doing that." If we can learn to develop that kind of a relationship, then we can, I think, truly befriend the ego and bring love to it where it tends to bring fear. And so we already know that love is going to dissolve fear every single time, and that's what we need to do. But I really also like your analogy of the spy trying to outwit each other, because very often the ego behaves in that manner. I'm going to
Yeah.
have to trick you.
Yep.
But I also like, and this is the thing that really, really gets me, when I spend time talking to my ego, this little child I imagine in front of me, it does in fact reveal to me its little things that it's set up to try and trip me up. And its reason for wanting to trip me up is because it is trying to heal from its own wound. So, and in fact, the shadow part, my ego mind, is trying to bring love into its own existence, but it's doing it in a dysfunctional way. And so that's what happens. And by learning to observe without judgment, with as much unconditional love and gratitude as possible, we then start to minimize the negative effects of our ego minds, and we start to bring it into more of a co-pilot role rather than the guy who's trying to run the show. That's really what I think is going on here. Now, you said you had a second part that you wanted to share on this, and I want to give you a chance to finish that because this is really fascinating stuff.
Well, to your point is that every single time that we operate from our egoic self, we are operating from a wounded childlike self. And like
Exactly.
you were saying, we are literally reparenting ourselves. We are with conscious awareness, allowing the part of us, the little kid that was hurt, like for me, 10 years old, dad left. Dad set my ideas about men and women and roles. I mean, for into my adult life. I was definitely going to be better wife than my mother, so my husband wouldn't abandon me, and I was going to make sure that my husband would never be a drunk, would never do these things. So I was going to pick the person who would let me control them, so that I could tell them how to be, so that they would never activate
Exactly.
the abandonment. That's a lot of work.
That's
That's
right. And I noticed
like,
you used the word control in there.
of course, because all control is motivated. Somebody wrote the motivation running our egos. Yes, all control is motivated in me not getting hurt again. So really, all relationships, when the ego is involved, are never about love. They are always about manipulation,
And
so that
managing
I
fear.
get
Yeah.
the conditional love that I need, because I don't feel safe being me. Because when I was little, I was abandoned. So there's got to be something wrong with me. So I'm not going to let you see that part. I'm going to avoid you seeing whatever my dad saw in me that made him leave. Well, I was a delusional child. Many, many years later, decades later, dad left the family, not because there was something wrong with me, but because he found somebody else he wanted to be with instead of my mom. And if I could objectively look at that as a 10-year-old, go, you know what? Yeah, dad, I understand. Mom's a bitch. I get it. You go run, go with that secretary, because you're gonna have a lot more fun over there. And of course, he chased that one and then chased another one, and that was his pattern. And but for me, as a 10-year-old impressionable child, all I heard afterwards were how horrible men were, because my mom and my grandmother made sure that they let us know, you can't trust men. You got to be in charge. You blah, 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 blah. So I
Right.
picked up those patterns. My ego had ideas that this is how a woman is, this is what a man does. So I went out to make sure my husband fit the mold of what I thought I needed, not realizing that he was just showing me how controlling I was, how scared I was, because all control comes from fear, that I literally recreated in so many ways the same scenario. But I needed to parent myself and give to myself my wounded little self. I had to invite her to come out and speak to me from that place of woundedness. And you know what's so magical is that when we allow, because I do this with my clients all the time, well, not so much recently because so many of my clients are very advanced. So we've already done this work, but we're there. There's the second part. I'm going to share that now. But once you begin to see the ego, it's always reacting. So I have a saying, the irritation is an invitation to see your ego's motivation. Because if you allow the irritation, if you stop it and observe it, oh, there comes that irritation, and you don't act on it, then you can observe, you can trace it down to the thoughts, the beliefs, the experiences, which the only way to heal them is through forgiveness. I had to forgive my little girl for, uh, you know,
Yeah.
making an opinion about the world from a very immature place. She didn't know what she was doing, but I needed to not listen to an immature child and live my life from that place. So that was the beginning of the undoing the ego, because once you reintegrate that hurt part within and say, okay, I now acknowledge that there was a part of me that was hurt. Behind that, this is the second part to all of this. Behind that idea of woundedness, because it's made up, it's not true. My dad didn't have anything, was not upset with me. There's nothing wrong with me. There was just an immature child observing the world, listening to what mother and grandmother were commentating about the world and about men. So then comes the work. And this is where, if people would do the ego work, it brings us to the doorway to the soul work. You cannot connect with your soul. You cannot have conversations with your soul until you're not listening to the ego.
Right.
Once you stop listening to the ego, that that's why we have to become like little children. Two parts: connect with your wounded self. Once you acknowledge the wound, that part of you dissolves, it disappears, it dissipates. It's just a memory, it's just an idea. That leads us to the doorway of our soul. That's when you can begin to tap into, how powerful am I that I made up a story that ran my life? So if I don't have that story running my life from a disempowered, fear-based place, how can I continue to experience life from a love-based place? That is to begin to allow that little girl who had all the dreams and all the ideas of all the unlimited potential that was possible to then begin to express herself. But she couldn't express herself because I was so afraid of life. I was so afraid of abandonment that
Right.
I couldn't fully be my joyful, carefree, happy child, because I went into overdrive to protect and defend and make sure nobody ever hurt me. So what did I set up? All kinds of opportunities for hurt, so that I would have those irritations as invitations to see, where did this come from? My egos are motivated with one thing. And again, these are things that I learned from A Course in Miracles. It makes it so simple and so clear. But egos are motivated with separation. It's to keep me separate from everything and anything, even though it lures me with, oh, I need to have somebody so that I'm not alone. I need to be connected. I need a partner to be happy. So I don't want to be alone. But we never show our true selves because it's hiding behind a wall of protection. So there's never a connection with anybody when you're operating from your ego, because the divisiveness, the wall, it's always about me against you. And I'm going to stay one step ahead. Before you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. How can you
Right.
have an intimate, connected relationship when you are always protecting yourself, but you're just not aware of that? So the second part to this is that when we drop the defenses, when we drop all of those, the shenanigans, the stop listening to the commentator in the head, and you begin to listen to your heart, oh my gosh, life becomes not only fun, but it becomes easier.
Right.
life then you see with such compassion. I was able to see everybody is either under the trance of the ego or not, or
Right.
various degrees of trance. So the surrendering is a process that I can hear. People start talking and I can hear or watch their actions. Where on the chart are they? What level of conscious, what chakra are they operating from? Are they stuck in their root chakra in defensiveness? Are they connecting to their voice? Are they using their voice? Even if they're speaking things that may not be totally completely truthful, they're speaking truth at a level that is true for them. So
Right.
that has just allowed me to be more available for really, truly, amazingly beautiful relationships.
Right. So this is beautiful, and I know we're getting close to well, we've kind of almost run out of time here, but I just want to kind of summarize what I heard here. The idea that transcending the ego or surrendering the ego, whichever way you wish to look at it, is a process. And the more you do that, the closer you get to your truth, which is in here, in the soul. And you mentioned at the very beginning when we started that really our ultimate goal here for all of us is to remember the truth of who we really are. And we can't do that until we at least understand the ego well enough that we can start the process of surrendering it. And because it's only then that we give ourselves permission not to be run by fear and to allow ourselves to move into this place of love, which is unlimited and unbounded. And once we get there, then compassion and gratitude start to show up, and forgiveness just naturally flows out of that. And before you know it, everything about life is a wonderful, delicious, fantastic experience. Well, Laina, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. Before I close out, I want to give you a chance to, if you have any final words you'd like to share with people.
Well, so what's coming up is I want to set us up for another conversation, because what is possible when we come to the soul is what allows us to create heaven on earth. And to observe what is happening in the Middle East from that place that is at peace is very different than from my ego, who would have liked to have taken sides. So really the final thing is that surrendering the ego is the end of suffering. It sets us up for the beginning of heaven on earth. And that is really truly what is so exciting about this work.
Right.
So that's all I got.
Well, I think you've established a title for our next conversation. Heaven on Earth sounds like a great title. Uh, so I'm going to look forward to having that opportunity with you at some point in the future. But again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. A couple of closing words here. I just want to remind people that Ego Mind Surrender offers you profound and compelling benefits that include inner peace, liberation from chronic stress and anxiety, a heightened sense of interconnectedness with all of existence, and a deep understanding of your true self. So I hope that you will find a way to embrace the journey of ego mind surrender so that you can enjoy the most miraculous of all transformations, the one that occurs within you. I want to thank you for watching today's program, and I want to remind you that you can catch the recording of this and all of my previous episodes on my website at lifemasterytv.com. And I would also like to remind you to practice my life mastery mantra every single day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod, your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.